welcome back to Otaku no Video. As always, thank you very much for joining me for a little video digging deeper into the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. This is not a review, this is going to be a video where I dig deeper into the themes and characters and special moments and plot twists and so forth in the Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya movie. So if you haven't seen it, spoilers galore in here. This is for folks who really want to get down into some of the more interesting bits of the movie. And I want to talk about some of the themes to begin with. The major one, which comes to head at the end of the film, is getting over yourself. And it's one of the things I really appreciated about the film, is that after Kyon has gone through all this, he really starts interrogating himself and asking himself that question, well, haven't you been having fun? And it really gets into this whole idea that basically Kyon's been a spoiled brat for most of the series. Things just aren't the way he wanted them to be, and they weren't what he expected, and so he's been sort of grumpy the whole time. But the things that's been going on have been fun and interesting. So one of the big things here is this idea that he finally decides to get over himself, and which leads into the other theme of enjoying yourself, of just, you know, accepting what's there and having fun with it. It's one of the remarkable things, which I'll get to later, how Kyon seems to really accept that. But you know, it's a really important lesson, and it's one of the things that this movie could have just avoided, and they could have just done a fan-pandering movie. But instead, they actually do deal with this question of, when life gives you something you don't expect, what do? How do you react? You can either be juvenile and immature and just shrink in on yourself and say, well, that's not what I want. Or you can say, well, that's part of my life. How can I enjoy it? How can I get something out of it? How can I do something with that? What can I get out of that? How can I make that an interesting, fun part of my life? And it's a very mature thing to do. And it's something that Kyon does finally get into and learn through that wonderful sort of instrumentality style sequence where he's sort of inside his own head at the ending. So good on them for that. The third theme of several is that of consequences, for both Kyon and Yuki in this case. I love the moment where Kyon's thinking back to where he pressed the enter key halfway through the film to say, no, I want to go back to the Haruhi verse. And saying, by doing that, he made a statement. He made a stand. And he said, I want the Haruhi version of reality. And now that things are tough, now that things are difficult, am I going to stand by that? I mean, one of the really core ideas of this movie is that you get safe and dull, or exciting and dangerous and scary. That really is the choice usually in life. You don't get exciting and safe at the same time. That's just the way things are. Fun is usually born of trying new things, trying things that are different and that you don't think are going to work out, you don't know are going to work out, of experimenting and doing things and being a little scared. And this really does attack that, and it really does bring in that theme, that Kyon now that he's realized this, he needs to stand by it. He needs to say, okay, you know, the consequences of that decision is that I now have to do difficult things. I'm now on the hook for things. Those are the consequences. Consequences also for Yuki, and I'll get to that more in a second, but I find it really interesting that in order for Yuki to create this universe, this sort of normal universe, she had to make herself extremely weak and extremely unlikable in a lot of ways, which I'll get to in a second. But that's a very interesting consequence, that she created a version of herself that's really in a dangerous spot. Interesting. Let me move on to some of the interesting moments of the film, the moments that really caught my attention. One of them was seeing human Yuki for the first time and realizing how pathetic and sad she is, how broken she is, how a real version of Yuki is this just pathetically introverted, scared of reality girl, a girl who just can't function, practically speaking, certainly not in a social sense. That's really an eye-opener. that these characters that we enjoy in Haruhi really in real life would be seriously psychologically, not disturbed, but would have serious psychological issues. And just realizing how this version of Yuki is very different, and what must Yuki have been going through to do that? But more on that in a little bit. Another remarkable moment was seeing that alternate Haruhi for the first time, seeing the Disappearance World version of Haruhi, because she looks very normal. She actually, because she's not changing everything around her, she looks like a normal, quiet, serious girl walking home from school with her boyfriend. And it really brought home to me how Haruhi, without the SOS Brigade, without all this stuff to keep her, going, I know girls like that. I recognize girls like that. I recognize guys like Itsuki. That would be a very normal sight. It brought home how normal these characters could be. And also how different Haruhi is with the SOS Brigade compared to how she would be normally. If you go back and look at episode 1, the chronological episode 1, you see that Haruhi is this very serious, very determined, very introverted girl who just doesn't have time for anything else. And she's a little different in the Disappearance version, but she's not having fun. And that's really, again, it reminds you of how much the SOS Brigade is important to her for really completing her in an important way. A lot of folks have mentioned the moment when Ryoko first shows up. I actually found that one on a bit too long for me. It was clear that Ryoko was showing up, and I was shocked. And I loved that element of it, and the fact that it does kind of make sense that you need this stand-in, if you will. But for me, the scene just went on too long. She kept on showing, she kept on walking, and she kept on walking, and Kyun was still surprised and still shocked and still reacting, and it kept on and on and on and on. And I recognize that part of that is Kyun's reaction. That Kyun just couldn't accept it, couldn't accept it, couldn't accept it. But for me, it was just like, okay, I understand what's going on here. Can we please move on with the movie, personally. Another big moment was the big climax when Ryoko shows up again. And I love the idea that Yuki created Ryoko specifically as her guardian, which begs the question of why. I mean, logically speaking, Yuki would never have reinserted Ryoko into this reality. But I think it was subconscious. This was all started because Yuki became more human. And I think she subconsciously realized, if I'm going to be this extremely quiet, extremely introverted, sort of scared of other people person, I'm going to need a protector. I'm going to need someone to physically protect me, because I won't be able to protect myself. I can't react to other people. Other people just scare me. So, she brought Ryoko back in specifically as that protector unconsciously, and that almost unravels the whole thing. I love that idea. And again, it fits perfectly. Which brings me to another moment, which was later on, there's a little moment where Kyun is repeating to himself the words that he hears as he's dying. It's clear when he's dying that Kyun also comes up next to him and says, we'll take over from here. That's obviously Kyun. So the fact that Kyun remembers that and then is repeating it to himself so that when the time comes, he can say the right words. It shows that character development. It shows that Kyun has learned and that he's now planning for the future, preparing for that moment whenever it's going to come. Great. Let's talk about some of the interesting characters here. There's really only two to mention, although the others are interesting in their own ways. But Kyun appears to be accepting this now, finally, and is actually enjoying the Haruhi-verse. And that's a fundamental change. I mean, the promo, everything about Haruhi has Kyun sitting around with this resigned half frustration about this whole thing. So the idea that he's now cool with it and he's going to, enjoy it himself. I mean, obviously he'll be, surprised by the things that Haruhi suggests, and he's going to push back against a lot of those things. But the idea that he's not going to just be digging in his heels the whole time, that means a completely different tone for the rest of the Haruhi animated works. Good on them for going in that direction, and I hope they do. That'll be really interesting and a welcome change, to be honest with you. I mean, I enjoyed the other aspect, but it's time for that. And it'll be interesting to see if they can do that without the fans screaming and yelling. I will say that much. Also, interesting little bit, I mean, getting back to this thing about Yuki, the fact that Yuki, to create a normal version of herself, creates this quiet, scared girl, this really pathetic human being. I mean, someone that your heart can still go out to, but still you see her and you realize how completely broken she is. Gosh. That is interesting. And interesting that Yuki's willing to do that to create normality. And that is better than the alternative. And it's one of the big twists, which I'll get to in a second, about the plot twists. But that's interesting. One other little bit, actually, is adult Mikuru. And I wanted to point out the fact that, just as a side thing, I was intrigued by how much adult Mikuru finds the real Yuki fundamentally disturbing. She doesn't like being around Yuki almost in the way that Sarah Connor doesn't like being around the Terminator. It's just, this is wrong. Yuki works outside the boundaries of physics and known science. And Mikuru just finds that fundamentally uncomfortable. I love that little twist. You have these two characters that really don't get along at all. And there's no real reason for them to. In fact, there's lots of reasons for that to happen. So good on them for having that in there. Now, getting to that plot twist. Of course, the big plot twist of the movie is the fact that Yuki caused all of this. And that was really a wonderfully touching moment of realizing that Yuki is now coming out of her shell. She's becoming more human. She wants more choice. She wants to be able to be a full person. And people are still treating her like this robot. And they're not asking her opinion. Knowing that, granted, she is going to generally go along with things, but still, of all the characters, she's the one who most wants to be given that choice. She's the one for whom choice is the most important as she's becoming more human. So the idea that she's been sort of neglected for a very long time is a wonderful little moment and a wonderful reminder to pay attention to your friends and what they're going through and what they need from you right now. Think about that. One final bit I wanted to mention here is the sort of informational revelation over the course of the movie, how things are revealed to you. And that was actually a bit of a downfall for me. One of the core ideas of Haruhi in general is the fact that it's all narrated by Kyon. And unfortunately in this case, because he's narrating so much, there were several scenes, especially ones with involving Ryoko, where I kind of wanted, where Kyon's narration was getting in the way, where I wanted to figure things out for myself, but Kyon was kind of explaining things to me. And I was like, can I just see it and realize it for myself, that that's why she's doing this, instead of Kyon telling me constantly every sort of thing that I'm seeing on screen? It just felt a little bit over the top, and it just felt like too much. The narration is fine as a device, but it was just overused, I think, in this film. Unfortunate. And again, it's one of those things where you do your best. I'm no big deal. So those are my thoughts on Haruhi, at least the stuff that I could type up and think up. So please, if you have your own comments, your own thoughts, please add them in the comments below. And please stop by my website, otakunovideo.net, and let's talk about these things and delve into some of the more, some of the deeper details of some of these anime. I think it's a very interesting and important thing to do because there is some more depth to talk about. So those are my thoughts. Those are the themes and characters and so forth. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care.